Powell will have to be accommodative. He will have to bring rates down. That means, the dollar is going to get weaker inherently. It goes back to that amorphous topic I've said at the beginning, trust. Trust is in everything is disappearing. It is a metric that the rest of the world doesn't trust the U.S. IOU and the U.S. dollar like it did in my father's age or my grandfather's age.
Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? Right now, the bomb strikes happening in Iraq are dominating the news, but there are other things that we can explore. I'm going to read an article pretty soon here from the UN talking about where Iraq currently stands as far as with the international community. You heard the gentleman at the beginning of this video. He was talking about the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. And, I spoke about this before. Right now, there's a push to do whatever it takes to make Biden look good. And that means even the Federal Reserve doing what they can to chip in on this whole venture. Cutting interest rates is a big step in that direction because if you have a adjustable mortgage, then, the house payments go down. If you have credit cards, then your interest rates go down. That's more money in the pockets of Americans. But what that also does is weaken the U.S. dollar, like the gentleman said. Weaken the U.S. dollar against other currencies. And that includes the Iraqi dinar. Now, the Iraqi dinar is pegged to the U.S. dollar. So let's explore what happens if they depeg from the U.S. dollar and what type of results that has if they do so. So let's get into this. Before we get started, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. If you're thinking about buying gold and silver, head on over to our friends at Miles Franklin. The link will be down below in the description. When you make your purchase, make sure you use promo code PIMPY, P-I-M-P-Y, and they'll take care of you. If you have any additional questions, you can reach us over here at this phone number or over here at this particular email. For all orders over $10,000, reach out by email and we'll make sure that you get a great deal. So come on over to Miles Franklin and add to your precious metal inventory. So if that's the case, an Iraqi dinar is pegged to US dollar. If the dollar starts to lose value because the interest rates are being cut, then is this the time for Iraq to depeg away from the US dollar? So let's talk about this just a little. So can Iraq depeg from the US dollar? The Iraqi dinar has been pegged to the US dollar since 2003. The peg was established to bring stability to the country's economy after the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime. However, there have been discussions and debates about whether Iraq should depeg from the US dollar in recent years. So as we go along, take away your personal bias out of this. I know there's a lot of you out there thinking there are certain steps that Iraq can take to increase the value of the Iraqi dinar, which is what you're focused on. You could care about the repercussions, okay? But this is why I'm saying every step that Iraq takes when it comes to their monetary policy, whether they delete the zeros or change the exchange rate, they have to think of the bigger picture. How does this affect their economy? But more importantly, what does this do to inflation? The pegging of the Iraqi dinar to the US dollar means that the Central Bank of Iraq sets an official exchange rate for the dinar against the dollar and maintains it within a narrow band. Right now we know it's pegged at an exchange rate of 1,310 dinars for every dollar. This pegging has provided a level of stability to Iraq's economy, particularly in terms of inflation and exchange rate fluctuations. The CBI's job is to manage and maintain a certain level of stability with the exchange rate, as well as inflation. Now, we know they're doing really good with inflation. As a matter of fact, we spoke about what is it going to take for the Iraqi dinar to delete the 3 zeros. And they needed to be within a sweet spot of 2 to 4% inflation rate. And although they're just slightly above in the 5 range, and that was due to the Rona when it broke out, they averaged over the last several years right in that sweet spot. There are several arguments in favor of depegging the Iraqi dinar from the US dollar. One argument is that depegging would allow Iraq to have more control over its monetary policy. Currently, Iraq's monetary policy is influenced by the United States Federal Reserve's decisions, which may not always align with Iraq's economic needs. Depegging would give Iraq more flexibility in setting an interest rate and managing its money supply. So we've had many conversations about Iraq wanting their own sovereignty. They want their own freedom. the ability to make their own decisions without having somebody babysitting them, this would be one of those steps. If they depeg from the US dollar, then it's on them what happens after that. So you can understand that if you've been relying on the peg for such a long time and you're not sure exactly what direction your country's going to go into, it could be a scary step. The benefit, of course, is you will have that freedom to make your own decisions. Another argument for depegging is that it could potentially stimulate economic growth, which is what they need, to be honest with you. Some economists argue that a flexible exchange rate regime could make Iraq's exports more competitive in the international markets, thus boosting economic activity and diversifying the economy away from its heavy reliance on oil exports, which is what they need. Now, that's something I spoke about. If the exchange rate's too high, then they cannot be competitive on the international market with their exports. If it's really low, of course, you're going to have a lot of foreign direct investors coming into Iraq because the labor cost and supplies and production is really cheap. On the other hand, it will help them have more purchasing power when it comes to imports. However, there are also significant challenges and risk associated with depegging from the US dollar. One major concern is the potential impact on inflation. Depegging could lead to a rapid depreciation of the dinar, which might fuel inflationary pressures in the economy. So you see, it's not all kittens and puppies on the other side of this thing. If Iraq is not set up the way it should be, when they depeg, it can have an opposite effect, and you could devalue their currency and cause inflation to skyrocket. Additionally, depegging could introduce greater volatility in the exchange rate, which might create uncertainty for businesses and investors. This uncertainty could deter foreign investment and destabilize financial markets. That's why I think it's interesting when I have conversations with a lot of listeners out there, or those listening to other content creators about all these fluff jobs that they do, making arguments with me about this. I go, look, it's not that simple. There's more things involved than you think. Oh, no, it's just like the Kuwait dinar. It's going to be the same thing. No, it's not. Two different subjects. If you delete the zero, that changes the exchange rate. No, it doesn't. Two separate subjects. If you do this, if you do that, no, you just don't just do it. You have to weigh the pros and cons of it. Yes, I would like to see Iraq depeg from the US dollar, but I also want to make sure that they are set up to do so before they do that. Again, my focus is on the Iraqi people and their ability to prosper from whatever's going to happen. Yes, I want to make money off this investment, but not at the expense of the Iraqi people. UN envoy in Iraq to step down at the end of May, says country on a knife's edge. The head of the United Nations political mission in Iraq, Janine Plasshart, told the Security Council on Tuesday she expected to step down at the end of May, adding the country was on a knife edge. The former Dutch defense minister was appointed by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in late 2018. The United Nations Assistant Mission for Iraq aims to advance inclusive political dialogue and helps coordinate humanitarian and development aid for Iraq to further continue on its path of stability and progress. An enabling environment will prove essential. So she's laying out the foundation for what Iraq needs to do to be on its own. And such an environment requires restraint from all sides. And this is what we spoke about several times. Iran-aligned groups, known collectively as the Axis of Resistance, have been waging attacks against Israel and U.S. targets from Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria since the Palestinian ally Hamas and Israel went to war in October the 7th. Washington responded by strikes in a cycle of escalated violence that Iraq officials said threatened to undo progress towards stabilizing the country after decades of conflict. While we are, of course, aware that many authorities and actors seek to limit further escalation, it is clear that the situation remains volatile. Iraq, indeed, the wider region, remains on a knife edge, with the tiniest miscalculation threatening a major conflagration, said Ms. Plasshart. There is an urgent need to cease attacks, be they originating from within or outside of Iraq, she said, adding, and as stated many times in the past, this must include reining in armed actors operating outside state control. These are the militant groups we've been speaking about in the news that are attacking U.S. targets. The United States invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein in 2003, precipitating years of insurgency war, fighting among Iraqis' ethnic and religious groups. Remember, I told you all the tribes, religious groups, ethnic groups, political groups. It makes it really hard to maintain stability there. It withdrew its troops in 2011, but sent thousands back after the ISIS surged in the country 3 years later. So there you have it. Sure, the value of the dollar is going to drop. So should Iraq depeg itself and be independent and make their own decisions with the possible risk of it losing value instead of gaining value? You let me know what you think. I look forward to hearing from you. I'm out.